Hey, it's Warren Sprouse. It's the Bible Forum. We are starting just a little bit later tonight than we normally do. It's at 8:30. Of course, for some of you, you noticed it's about 8:32. My clock still says 8:30. We had a Christmas cantata in our church this evening. It started at 7:30. It didn't finish 6:30. It didn't finish till after 7:30. And you know how it is trying to get out of places like that. This is the bulletin that came with it, in case you think I'm lying to me. My name is in here. About 20 people in the choir and did our thing. And then I had to run home and set all this up. But we're here. We're not going to be dissuaded. We've got a whole load of things to talk about. Christmas is coming up. We'll be doing some of that, talking a little bit about that as the night unfolds, and we'll talk about next week, which is Christmas Sunday, believe it or not. We've got homeschooling in the news. I don't know how much you are into homeschooling. We, as a family and as a church, when we had my own church, homeschooling was top drawer. It's one of those things you need to think about doing. But it's in the news, and this time it's actually positive. Usually it's very critical. It starts off with a negative thing, but it ends up very positive. Apparently there's still the battles are being fought. This time it's in New York. But there seems to be a growing appreciation, at least a grudging appreciation for homeschooled kids. And we're going to hear what one college professor, science kind of guy, had to say, what he learned about homeschoolers. Then there's the New York Times. I know none of you get the New York Times. It's not worth getting. It's that thick. It's got nothing in it. But they've admitted to something that we all kind of thought was true by the way they acted and operated. But a managing editor said that the New York Times knows nothing about religion or the role that religion plays in people's lives. Now that alone is a stunning admission, but it's probably not as unique as you might think. We'll talk about it. Organized so-called Christian religion is becoming ever more strange and destructive. From the formal Presbyterian types to the crazy charismatics, there seems to be a disconnect between biblical reality and what they believe and do. Of course, there is a truism in there somewhere, and that truism is what you believe determines how you live. Did you know that? And maybe that's really what's going on. We're going to talk about that. I've got part one of a series. I don't know how long the series is going to go, at least 2 parts, maybe more. I've entitled it Jesus Before Time. It's a doctrinal series in honor of Christmas, but increasingly church folks have no idea how it is that Jesus of Nazareth can be God, or why. And then there's a bunch of miscellaneous things that we'll deal with. A growing, dangerous doctrine that maintains Christians should command the devil. That's a sure way to get yourself hurt. But they are making this a part of the Christian doctrine. And it's not just the crazy charismatics in the world either. There's a growing number of churches that are falling into this crazy pattern, whether it's the charismatic thing or the contemporary thing or some of the doctrines. Christianity, organized Christianity in America, is changing. Now, it changed in the 60s, but it was just a fringe group. It was just this or that, and then it branched out, and it got into mainline denominations. It got into the Roman Catholic Church, and by the 80s, it was becoming a settled event in churches. They had bits and pieces of it probably represented in most churches, except for the very staunch, straight, fundamentalist kinds of places. But even now in those churches, this thing is permeating. It's bubbling. And it's not good. And so we'll talk about all of this before the night is over. Well, I want to start this evening with current events. We've got a new president who is getting ready to take over. He's putting a team together so that he might lead us into the third decade of this 21st century. Can you imagine that? The third decade. Already the talking heads are changing their minds about him. Of course, the liberal, the progressives, they never will. But the other types are saying, maybe we didn't see this correctly. Maybe there's something here. We need to look at it. Will he bring back order to American culture and to economics? Will he settle the Middle East issue? Will he tame China, who has, by the way, just this past week committed an act of war on the high seas against the United States? They stole U.S. property on the high seas in an aggressive military operation. The Donald says, what they did, in case you haven't been paying too much attention, is there was a drone, looks like a torpedo with little wings, that was sent out weeks ago, I don't know, month, I don't know, it's been out there, and it's floating around, tooling around in the ocean out there in the China Sea. And it's picking up data as to the current flows in the algae and, chemical stuff and all the rest of it. And it's a science project. And the boat that ship, owned by, science type guys, came to collect their wares, their property. And a Chinese ship shadowing this whole thing launched a small boat that quickly ran out there, got between them, and picked it up and ran away. And people here in government are saying, we want our property back. And the Donald is saying, keep it. Now, Donald doesn't know anything about foreign policy. He doesn't know anything about the high seas and maritime law and all the little niggling things that go into this event. But it shows his gut reality. They stole a piece of equipment, sophisticated equipment from us. Now we want them to give it back. He says, keep it. Why? Well, he doesn't explain it, but others have explained it. What if they put something in that? What if they booby-trapped it, or they've got some equipment in there to collect data on us? Why would we bring that back to our boat? Let them have it. And I think that this is the way the man operates. He just has a sense about the kinds of things that need to be done. Will that work for him? Has already. Will he make the United States government more functional, less complex, contradictory? I think he will. You look at the cabinet he's put together, they're going to get it done or want to know why, and they're going to make enemies all up and down the street. You watch. Will he settle the illegal immigration issue? And what will that mean to U.S. and Mexican relations? Will the more liberal states secede from the Union? There's 2 or 3 of them out there, talking about it. Washington State, Oregon, California. There's talk. I just wonder if they'll let us vote on it. Because I'd vote to let them go. They're not helping us any. He's already proposed a tax change. There's 4 levels to it, 3 actually. Because if you're under $25,000 a year, you're not going to pay any tax. If you're married and you make $50,000 a year between you, household income, you're not going to pay any tax. If you're just the head of the household, this is women who are single, heads of households, you make under $37,000, you're not going to pay any tax. For those that make $50,000 as single individuals, $100,000 if you're married, $75,000 if you're head of household, you're going to pay 10%. That's after you get your standard deductions. If you make $150,000, as an individual, 300,000 as a family, 225 head of household, you're going to pay 20%. You make 150,000 and up as a single individual, or 300,000 and up, or 225,000 and up, you're going to pay 25%. The corporate levels also come down. The top marginal rate in his program would be 20%. At the lower levels, effectively zero. And no estate tax. He's looking for the youngest U.S. Supreme Court judge candidate he can find that would be the kind of conservative that he thinks we need. If he gets to appoint 3 in his next 4 to 8 years, he'll set that court up for another whole generation. Apparently, he's looking in the realm of libertarian. He had Judge Andrew Napolitano over for a sit-down last week. The judge talked about it on one of the shows he was on. He's encouraged. He said that Donald wanted to know everything he knew, and he launched into his standard libertarian spiel, and it was well received. And so Napolitano is encouraged. But it's in foreign policy and social reform where he'll face the biggest challenges. But the Donald knows how to get what he wants. After 8 years, Obama just now mentioned the aging computer system that the government is working with. How old is this system? Well, they're using something that most of you, and within the sound of my voice, have never ever seen. The great big 4, 5, 6-inch floppy disks. I saw it on a film. They did a piece on it, one of the news things. Great big floppy disks. Those things go back to the late 1980s, early 1990s. I talked to a lady here in Wilmington that works for the government up here in the Navy base. Works for the federal government. She says, oh yeah. She said, these things are ancient. We hire new people coming in. They don't know how to work them. We have to teach them. They know all about computers and technology, but they've never seen anything like this. And 25% of the workforce here in the state are going to retire in the next 5 years. This is going to be a lot of fun. Our current president never mentioned it. 8 years. And this has been going on for 2 decades. You heard about it, maybe you read about it. A veteran was found dead in a shower at a VA hospital. He'd been laying in that shower dead for 9 hours. That's what we do. That's how government runs a hospital. Another was found to have had maggots in his wounds. He died in the hospital when they got, I don't know if they did an autopsy or whatever, but they found maggots in wounds in his body. How long had they been there? What were the wounds? Where'd they come from? Who knows? This is how the federal government does hospital. You've seen how they do taxes. Our government is bloated, it's antiquated, and it's stalled in its own convoluted and confusing bureaucracy. Our military is operating at levels lower than that of the 1940s, with equipment that lacks spare parts. In some cases, it's up to a third of our aircraft that are grounded for lack of parts. Another story recently was printed as to how the military types went into, like the Smithsonian, may have been the Smithsonian, or one of those museums where they have old aircraft to get spare parts. And it's not the first time, and it's not the only place they've done this. The Donald's cabinet is almost complete. He's only got 1, maybe 2 more to go. Still got 3 weeks before he's going to be inaugurated. His tweeting is bypassing mainstream media, driving him crazy. His energy at 72 years of age, that's my age, is shadowing and dwarfing everything we know about government. His enemies are in disarray, confused, blaming everything and everybody else. In short, the Donald is having a time of his life. Oh, and it appears that his daughter, Ivanka, will act as First Lady in the official functions. I always thought the First Lady was the wife, or if you didn't have a wife, a sister, or some relative or something. But apparently the First Lady as a title is just for official functions. He could have anybody fill in there if he wanted to. And his daughter's apparently going to be the one. You need to watch out for Ivanka. I've never had a sit down with the woman. I've never heard her say a lot over a long period of time. Don't really know much about her except what I read and what I see. And I'll tell you what, she seems like the real deal. Hillary is all upset that she couldn't be the first woman president. You might be saying Madam President to Ivanka one day. You never know. But it's going to be interesting. Now, if Russia, China, and ISIS will just cooperate. In other news, we've got New York City on the warpath with homeschooling. I mentioned that at the top of the hour. Parents in New York who want to homeschool their children must fill out forms, file them with the state, with the city, whatever, if they want to keep their children out of school and teach them at home. Apparently the parents are doing it, but a significant percentage still get that knock on the door from the truant officer. Why? Because apparently the city of New York is slow. Some would say negligent in following through. And so the paperwork sits for long periods, unprocessed. So what? So the child is now classified as truant, and Child Protective Services dispatches an agent to check it out. It's not unusual, they say, to get a knock on the door at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. The officers understand, but still are required to enter the house. You have to let them in. And there's a conversation they must have with the child. And they need to peek in your refrigerator. There's a parents group that's suing the city. They claim the city, quote, rather than follow the clear direction of New York's regulation governing homeschooling, these defendants regularly make demands not included in the regulation and fail to follow the deadline imposed on them by the regulation. The complaint goes on to say this routine repeated bureaucratic indifference to the rights of parents to choose homeschooling has led to significant delays and loss of services, and has caused false reports of educational neglect to be made to the New York City Administration of Children's Services, which have then caused needless, intrusive investigation of innocent parents. Case was filed against New York City for what was described as a systematic mistreatment of homeschooling families. We can only stay tuned. But think about this. There's a college professor. His name is Gordon, Dr. Gordon. And he's never had a very positive feeling about homeschoolers. But he's become a fan. Like many, he believed homeschoolers were sheltered individuals, unable to fend for themselves once they left the comfort of their own home. But Dr. Gordon's mind began to change as he encountered homeschooled students in his courses in mechanical and aerospace engineering at the University of Central Florida. In a recent op-ed piece penned for the Huffington Post, Dr. Gordon explains several reasons why he's become a proponent now of homeschooling. Number one, he says homeschoolers are problem solvers. Dr. Gordon's research labs are challenging, and they require students to be inquisitive, think outside the box, solve problems. As he explains, quote, parent-educated students that I've met exhibit a strong intellectual vitality and passion for exploring difficult concepts. Secondly, he says homeschoolers are self-directed. According to Dr. Gordon, the homeschooled student's ability to problem solve is related to his ability to be an independent, self-directed learner. He notes that it's plausible that in their homeschool environments, they've already been given a vast number of opportunities to grow their capacities for self-direction. Consequently, their inclination for independent study seamlessly transfers to the scholarly research environment. And thirdly, he says homeschoolers are high achievers. Like any good researcher, Dr. Gordon likes to back up his observation with hard facts. When it came to homeschooling, the high marks students receive on tests were well suited to this purpose. He says on standardized college entrance exams, the homeschooled have scored on average at the 65th to 80th percentile. That's on a standardized academic achievement test compared to the national average based on public school data. University officials have more recently recognized the value the value that is added by bringing these students to their campuses and attract them with separate entrance application sites with slightly modified guidelines, such as the University of Central Florida, Georgia Tech, Stanford, and Arizona State. And fourthly, he says homeschoolers bring diversity. According to Dr. Gordon, the learning process is always furthered by a variety of opinions, backgrounds, and ideas. Homeschooled students, he says, have and will continue to add to the richness of our individual and collective experience. Isn't it interesting that the qualities which endeared Dr. Gordon to homeschoolers are the very ones that the education system has been trying so desperately to instill in its students in the last several decades, unsuccessfully? What's the message here? You have probably known for some time. Parents at home are just as capable of instilling these traits in their children, if not more so, than the experts in institutional schools. As a parent, have you ever run across a magazine for children called Highlights? I know you know all about it. They show up in doctors' offices, other places, and the purpose is to expose children who are learning to read to interesting and educational concepts from around the world. But one that was missing from this publication, that did not go unnoticed, was the idea of same-sex couples. Why that has to be in a child's educational document, I do not know. But the homosexuals are demanding that it be placed in this Highlights magazine. So Highlights is going to do it. Something else you parents need to watch out for. It used to be that human beings in this country at least viewed their responsibility in terms of protecting children from things they could not understand or were not ready for. Now, it doesn't matter. Parents are expected to, quote, prepare their children for the real world. Same-sex couples is not the real world. It's a fake world. It's an artificially manufactured world. Same-sex, same-gendered individuals cannot marry. They can live together. They can be in corporate business together. Contracts all over the place. They cannot marry. But we don't worry about what the words mean. We just have to have it. And we have to expose our children to as much filth, garbage, immorality, evil, and violence as possible. Why? Because that's what's in the world. You want your child to be balanced, don't you? And then we are shocked when these children do bizarre things or grow up to be morally warped. Welcome to America at the end of the age.